standing at the border of what we used to know. 5 points in the darkness make a different kind of show. They say we're better together, but what do they know when the stars align differently down here below? And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Remember all the stories that your granddad told about a republic that wouldn't be controlled. Now the suits in the city say we've all been sold, but there's a fire burning that just won't get old. And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. They draw their lines on paper, we draw ours in the sand. Some dreams are getting closer, while some don't understand. Don't understand. The highways stretch forever toward a setting sun, where cattle graze on memories of battles won. They say unity's the answer, but maybe we're done with playing by the rules of the chosen ones. Oh, maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Our own sky. Our own sky.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is that time again, the time when we do our, our chat, our visit with one another. The time when I get to pour yet again another cup of coffee, and we get to spend time together. And I'm excited for tonight. We got, I think we got a lot of great questions that have come in, and I'm anxious to dig into them. So, without further ado, let's get started. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist Movement, and this is Late Night Coffee Talk. This is that time once a week where I take a break from working on Texas independence and come here, fire up the camera, the microphone. Yeah, I am mic'd up. I had to make sure. Anyway, I fire it all up and I answer your questions, right? Most often, 98% of the time, it's going to be something that you talk about, right? Something that you want comment on or something you have a question on. Occasionally, I bring something that I have to get off my chest, which I think, oddly enough, based off the feedback, you guys don't mind it if I rant. So, if it happens, it happens. I can't be responsible for what a caffeine deficiency does to my mood. So there we go. Anyway, just a reminder, if you want to submit your question, it is quite easy. If you're watching on YouTube, drop your question in the chat. And while you're there, give us a like, a subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And be sure to share this with your friends, right? Share it with, well, or people you don't necessarily like that well. I guess they technically don't have to be friends, but share it anyway. Also, Super Chat is active. So if you'd like to continue to support the work that we are doing to make Texas a self-governing independent nation, be sure to drop a Super Chat, especially for content that we are providing. If you find that it's useful, we need all the help we can get, right? Additionally, if you're watching on one of the Facebook pages, be sure to drop your question in the comments. And while you're there, go ahead and like and share. If you're watching us on X, as more and more of you are, you can drop your question in the chat of the video. I have to say this every time. You can't just reply to the post. You actually have to go watch the video and then go into the chat and drop your question. I get angry emails from people who are like, you don't answer my question, like you don't put it in the right place. If it doesn't go in the right place, I can't help you. And a big welcome to those of you that are watching on Rumble. I think we may be getting close to figuring out how to get Rumble chat integrated over here. And I'm looking forward to that because, right now we don't have a good, easy way to interact with you guys. But look, if you are watching on Rumble, be sure to go over there and like our page and hit the notifications. Look, if you download the Rumble app, we hear all the time people don't get notified that actually subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're not getting emails from us. They're going into your spam box or your email service provider's blocking them, whatever. Here's what I do know. If you download the Rumble app and you subscribe to our channel, you will get a notification every time we go live. So that could be one way definitely to bypass big tech censorship. All right, let's do this. We have lots of questions via email, already some piling up over here in the chat and the comments. And I'm looking forward. Hang on, I'm dropping that one. I'm going to go ahead and throw that bad boy in there. Okay, so let's go to email first. Boom shakalaka. Here we go. We got lots of them over here, and a lot of people getting in kind of early this week. Okay, so let's see here. Let me make sure I've got these. Okay, this one is from Franklin. Franklin says, what can Texans and Texas do to preserve the Republic of Texas with its Christian values and traditions from the encroachment of Islamism, wokeism, and globalism that would destroy freedom at any cost? Did we let the fox in the hen house, and can it be fixed? That's actually a really interesting question, Franklin, because I will tell you that this is actually something that I guess maybe I partially touched on in my wrap up in the last podcast episode, the Texas News podcast. And a lot of that conversation, if you haven't watched it, it's a great interview with Alan West. You're going to want to do that. We talk about the school choice debate, and we talk about dysfunction in the Texas legislature. But in the wrap up, as I was, kind of trying to summarize everything we talked about, it was very clear to me, based off of some of the things that I hear out there, that a lot of people are thinking about this issue in a very kind of a backwards way, right? And a lot of it is spurred from the question that we get all the time about, well, how can we be sure that government after independence is going to be any better than government before independence? And the specific focus being on the state level government we kind of have. And on the surface, it seems like a legitimate concern that people have. But when you really unpack it and realize, look, you've got the ability right now to actually do something about it, right? You want good government here in Texas, you don't have to wait until Texas becomes independent to get that good government. Now, that will hasten the process, and I've explained many times before why that is. But understand that that's not something you have to wait for. It's been pretty clear in the last several times we've been together here on Coffee Talk. When we were talking about why we had to be strategic and essentially not file the referendum legislation this session. Why did we not get it filed? We had to be strategic because the dysfunction of the Texas House made it untenable for us, right? There was no path to getting that thing through the Texas House. And so you got a limited amount of resources. You got to focus those things where they're going to be the most important, which is advancing the cause of Texas independence and looking forward to how do we remove that obstacle or that roadblock, okay? I know this sounds like I'm going a long way around, Franklin, so just bear with me. So all of that is to say that the power ultimately to solve the issue of governance here in Texas is in our hands, and we have the power to do that right now. And this seems like kind of what you're asking, Franklin. You're talking about, how can we preserve it? Well, you could preserve it by being active and getting other people active and doing the things that we saw were absolutely possible in this last primary election, right? I mean, let's be honest. Let the marketplace of ideas work, and that sounds great in the absence of external intervention. So when the government steps in and puts its thumb on the scales and says, we have to prefer this viewpoint over this viewpoint over here, well, that's when we get into trouble, when they legislate and codify things that are contrary to the values of Texans. So, there is a reason, there is a rationale why we need to work on those things. Look, I'm going to tell you, John Bolgiano is watching right now. I've been swapping messages with him all day. He was there at the Capitol today to sit through committee hearings, the State Affairs Committee hearing on 3 pieces of legislation that are part of our priority legislation package. And I was subjected to the misfortune of having to have it on in a couple of different screens here in the house. So, John, while I didn't have to travel to Austin, I share your pain nonetheless. But I'm sure John could hop on here and tell you, look, when it comes to Austin, quote the Joker from the Michael Keaton Batman movie, this town needs an enema, right? There are some things that are happening there that simply just should not be so. They don't represent who we are as a people. And we've made it very clear, if your representative doesn't represent you, then you have to change out your representative. So what can we do, right? You said, what can Texans in Texas do? Well, the first thing we can do is, if we're fighting to get away from bad governance in Washington, D.C. and move Texas toward a self-governing independent nation, then what we can do is fight like crazy to make the government here in Texas a model of the independence and the post-TEXIT governance that we seek. And I would tell you right now, what I see in Austin, Texas, I do not believe is reflective of the kind of government that we will get or that we want after a successful TEXIT vote. I don't think it is. Now, granted, those of you who have sat through the TEXIT blueprint or have taken the online version of it, you know that TEXIT becomes a mechanism for us to make wholesale changes in government in Austin. I mean, TEXIT is the issue that breaks the back of the political establishment, right? But in the meantime, any victories that we can get that give us better representation and speed us on the path toward becoming operationally and structurally like a self-governing independent nation, that's where we've got to double down on. So, I would just encourage you, Franklin, to fall back on what our mission is, right? The mission of the Texas Nationalist Movement is to secure and protect the political, cultural, and economic independence of the nation of Texas. If you focus on that aspect of it, then your perspective on this issue will become clear, and your path will become much clearer as far as what you need to do moving forward. But I will say this immediately: you need to plug into what we're doing. If you are not a member, if you are not a donor, if you are not a volunteer, if you are not plugged into your local group, and if you don't have one, if you're not scrambling to get with organizational development, figure out how you could start one, those are the things that we would ask you to do. Our asks are very simple, right? There's basically 5 things that we ask of you. If you do those 5 things or plug into one or more of those 5 things, then you'll get all of the direction that you could possibly need to move forward. So anyway, thank you for that question. Let's see what we got over here in the chat. Okay. Oh, yeah. And for those of you just joining us late, just a reminder, you can drop your questions on YouTube, drop them in the chat. Oh, yeah. And I even forgot, you can send them via email like these people. Send it to coffeetalk@thetnm.org. The address will be down here on the screen. But, drop your questions in. Okay, this one is from Nathan Longacre. He says, do we have to settle upon the absolute conclusion that we will secede? Or can we just use the threat of secession to our advantage and make actual secession a last, albeit still viable resort? Let me just say this. If we're talking about do we as the Texas Nationals, I just told you what our mission is: political, cultural, economic independence of the nation of Texas. So we're always going to work for independence. And frankly, it's just because it's a better position for us, right? This is self-government is its own benefit. There's nothing that can be done to overcome the federal dysfunction. So the question I think that you're saying is it suitable for us, because you said we, for independence, because the secession word doesn't apply for a lot of different reasons, but is independence our plan B? No, independence is our plan A, right? We're not the Texas might be a nation movement, right? Or Texas could be a nation movement, or the TEXIT movement, or the Texas Nationalist movement. If we're a nation, then by right, we should be a self-governing independent nation. I mean, who wants to be a nation and be under the thumb of somebody else making decisions for you, right? So this is who we are. We're people who believe that Texas should become a self-governing independent nation. It's not contingent upon who's getting their mail at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, or what party's in control of Congress, or what those black-robed priests of the federal godhood do in the Supreme Court. Our support for independence is not contingent and should never be contingent, right? If you say that you're a Texas nationalist and you're thinking about Texas independence as your plan B, then you're not a Texas nationalist, right? So granted, not everybody's going to be. Some people are looking at this pragmatically. They're looking at federal government caused me pain. I want to be away from that pain. And so if I can get some immediate, albeit temporary relief, well, then this independence thing might go on the back burner. That's not a good situation to be in. I mean, think about it from the standpoint of, if you were living with an abusive spouse and it's like, okay, well, he stopped beating me this week. So, maybe leaving him is really just kind of plan B. It's maybe the last resort. No, if your spouse abuses you, physically abuses you, you get the heck out of there. It's the word of every abuser. Hey, honey, I'm going to change, right? I'll change. but maybe I'll go to an anger management class. But ultimately, abusers continue to be abusers, and particularly when they see no repercussion from it. So, Nathan, I really appreciate the question, and I would encourage you to really think deeply about this issue, right? Because it sounds like you may be looking at this sort of as your plan B, or trying to say, maybe now is not the right time. Well, when is the right time? Because if at any point, what would the federal government have to do for you to say, I'm out of here right now? I mean, what point would you get to? And if that point exists at all, then that at least means that you're in support of the ability of Texas to leave. And then you just have to determine what your pain threshold is. But more importantly, you have to learn to appreciate the right of self-government as a value of its own. Either Texans are the best people to govern Texas, or they're not. And if you believe that Texans should be the only ones to govern Texas, then you can't really justify staying in the Union a moment longer, because we do not enjoy a right of self-government. Not in this system, not by any stretch of the imagination. I could get into things about how your question presupposes that the federal government is capable of reform. Why threaten it if you're not going to do it? I mean, that's just kind of the thing. And so if you think that a threat of a state withdrawing would make them straighten up and fly right, then you believe that there are some circumstances under which the federal system could be reformed. And I will tell you that even some of the most diehard happy people that are watching Trump and Elon Musk and company take a wrecking ball to the federal government aren't believing that anything's getting fixed, at least not in the long term. So anyway, again, sir, thank you for your question. Let's get back over here. Let's see here. Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to determine if this was a question or a comment. This is from Connie. Connie says, Daniel, in tonight's Coffee Talk, would you please address the following? Securing Texas lands against ownership and occupation by foreign nationals, especially from countries that seek to harm us. These are my thoughts and questions. Okay. Wait. Oh, there's more. Maybe. Yeah, there's a lot here. Why are Chinese companies being allowed to gain a foothold in Texas and into our power system? Because it's been allowed. I mean, things happen because it's allowed to happen, right? So once Texas gains independence, what will be done to ensure that Texas farms, ranches, and other properties stay in the hands of Texas landowners only, and out of the hands of countries who seek to do us harm? That's not anything we have to wait for total independence. Unless, and I think this is a very serious concern. So just so you guys know, that there was legislation floated in the last session that would have banned land ownership in strategic locations from foreign adversaries or their proxies. And when they talk about foreign adversaries, let's be honest, everybody's talking about China, right? No, there's no secret here about who they're talking about. And that came after a lot of fairly well publicized exposés showing that there was land ownership by Chinese landowners, either individuals or corporations, around strategic locations in Texas that those people were connected to, or in some instances, I think perhaps direct proxies for the People's Liberation Army in China. So this scare came up, right? And rightly so. Everybody was nervous about this. It's like, wait a minute, China's kind of long gaming this thing. I mean, communists have a tendency to kind of look long, especially communists in Asia. Okay, they have a multi-generational view of conquest, and this purchase of land was pretty alarming to a lot of people. And so there was legislation that was raised. It got shot down last session. There's multiple bills this session that deal with the issue. I believe one had a hearing in the Senate the other day. But a lot of the concern, and rightly so, is that it will ultimately be struck down by the federal courts. And I think if you were to look at the track record that the Trump administration has had so far with some of the more hardcore executive orders, I think that concern is well founded. So we have a mechanism now. The people of Texas have expressed their will that this is a concern for them. And yet again, we can't have legitimate policy discussions here in Texas because the federal government is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I mean, I literally watched testimony today over a transactional gold bill. And one of the Democrat committee members was talking about how, well, the federal government could rule it unconstitutional. Well, so what? How about we concentrate on doing the thing that's the right thing for Texas and Texans? And if the federal government doesn't like it, they can go kick rocks. I mean, how about we have some attitude like that instead of this, whatever it is, this ridiculous slave mentality that says we must always kiss the behind of Uncle Scam, right? It doesn't matter if they're wrong or right. We must always be subservient. We must always put what's best for Texas and Texans on the back burner for fear that some congressman or some president or some judge is going to get their feelings hurt over it, right? How about we get Texas elected representatives that actually put Texas and Texans first? What a novel concept. If only we had people that had signed a pledge that said they would put Texas and Texans first. Wow, we've got that, right? But what our people need is, just like I talked about a moment ago, right? In Franklin's question, we have got the power to deal with this issue right now. And if we're not getting the results that we feel like we need to get out of these guys, then we got an opportunity. Your sights, if you're not happy with what's happening, your sights need to be set on what am I going to do right now to advance the cause of Texas independence in the next primaries. It's that easy. What am I going to do right now? Am I going to run for office? Am I going to find somebody and back them? Am I going to get a Texas First candidate? Am I going to volunteer for the TNM, learn how to block walk, get all this information? I mean, what are you going to do today to be prepared for the opportunity to knock those guys out of the box? I'm telling you, some of these incumbents that are absolutely the worst people that put Texas at the bottom of the heap, they've already got challengers. Not all of them should, but some of them before the session even got jumped off good already have challengers. And look, I know a lot of you guys are thinking, yeah, boy, that Texas House is jacked up. You need to start putting your eyeballs on the Senate too. I mean, we can be happy with some of the legislation that's pushing through there, but I'm going to be honest with you. Some of it is just a bit feel good, right? We've got sky high property taxes. We got people screaming to eliminate property taxes. And what we got is Dan Patrick doing selfie videos at the lottery ticket store and at the weed store, right? Maybe those are legitimate concerns, but are they the top concerns for Texans? Is that the thing that is affecting your life the most? Is that the one? Are those two things the things that are affecting your life the most? Sure. Maybe people consider that low-hanging fruit, but when you got people being taxed out of their homes, right? When you've got that happening and you've got the real risk of a replacement for Donald Trump however, if you have an adverse Congress in the next midterms, or you have somebody that's worse than Kamala get elected in the next presidential election, right? You've got those very real possibilities, that pendulum swinging back, and you got to ask yourself, why in the world are these guys not taking things seriously, like Andy Hopper's bill about financial risk management, right? or bills that strengthen the Texas State Guard, fully militarizes them and gets them ready for the next idiot at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who says, "Oh, come all ye faithful," and opens the border wide open, turns the spigot way up. What about that? So I'm just saying, if you're just focused and shaking your fist at the House, but you're giving the Senate a pass by, as they push things across the finish line that frankly are not the top concerns and priorities of Texans, then, I would say instead of getting a single shooter, maybe you need a double barrel. Maybe you need one looking at the House and one looking at the Senate, because in my estimation, while the House is dysfunctional as all get out, I'm not seeing a lot to be happy about coming out of the Senate either. I mean, there's some things that kind of make you smile a bit. Yeah, that's cool. But think about that when your property tax bill comes due and, you get your pittance of relief of rent that you got to pay to the government just so you can keep the house that you own. Remember that. Anyway, Connie, I don't know if I answered your question, but it sure felt like it. It was, I think, an answer. So let's get over here. Let's look. Okay. This is from Lance. Lance says, "What's taking so long? Let's do this. You'll lose Texas and gain Canada." I don't know they're going to gain Canada. I literally, right before this, read about and saw pictures from a press conference that was being held up in Alberta. And what you've got is the various independents, political parties up there and organizations are coming together to say, hey, look, let's don't even talk about Alberta becoming a state or Canada. Canada's not going to be a 51st state. Okay, it's not happening. But they're saying, look, let's have a referendum on Alberta's independence before we start talking about all this statehood garbage, right? Basically, they're saying, look, we were in line first. And they have been. They've had a very active and thriving movement for independence for years and years and years. And I saw one of the polling graphs. I guess it was the last week, where they showed polling on the issue over time. Look, support for independence in Alberta is higher than it's ever been. I mean, it only didn't take very very long under Trudeau to make that happen. And let's be honest, his replacement's not much better. So Alberta's got one foot out the door. They're like us, right? They're looking at the exit sign and they're headed that direction. So, to your point, what's taking so long? I think I've made that very clear about what is taking Texas independence so long. If I could wave a magic wand and make it happen, it would have happened yesterday. It would have happened August 24th, 1996. But you see, it's not the Daniel Miller nationalist movement, right? It's not me. There's no dictatorship. I can't go and put, and tell everybody this is what you're going to do, because Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution is clear. All political power is inherent in the people, not in the person, right? Not in the politicians, not in the pollsters, the pundits, it's in the people. And so if you want to make this happen, if you want independence to happen, it's got to be the people. And it will happen when the people are ready for it to happen. Those of us that are here are going to always work for it. But other people, you got people that hokey pokey in. They're in when things look bleak on the federal side, but then they take a reprieve, or it's their plan B or whatever it is, right? But it's ultimately going to be up to the people. The people are necessary to not only win the vote, but to also get the vote and to secure our independence. The people are the key element at every phase of the TEXIT process. And so, what's taking so long? That's a question that you should, if you're a TEXIT supporter, that is a question that you should be putting to everyone else that you've ever spoken with that said, you know what, I bet Texas would be better off as an independent nation. We'll do something about it. That's a question you need to be asking them. I got nothing to be ashamed of. I roll out of my rack every day and get to work for Texas independence till I roll right back in the rack. I mean, I won't be back in probably in bed until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because I pour everything into this. And I'm not saying that's what everybody else has got to do. But what I am saying is, when people come to me and say, why is it taking so long? It's like, look, all you got to do is just get in the game. Get in the game. Become a member. Register your support. Become a member. If you don't have time to exchange, make a contribution. Carve out a little bit so that other people can do that, right? But if you've got time, volunteer. If you don't know what to do to volunteer, plug into the training. Find mentors in the organization. Get in the game. Be a part of what we're doing. And then it doesn't take so long. I hate to use just old cliche terms, but many hands make light work. And so are your hands working? Are they? Because if not, we need you. We need all hands on deck. All right. Good question, Lance. Thanks, buddy. All right, let's go take this one. Man, we're blasting through here today. Okay, I actually answered that one. So let's go here. Okay. Hey. Okay. Shout out to Eddie, who is not able to make it because Eddie is recovering from surgery. Hope you get well soon, bud. Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's go here. All right. This is from Tim. When is the TNM going to come out with new informational handouts that reflect the new political situation? We've been using the same handouts for the past 10 years. We've been using, some of the handouts are about 10 years old. Not all of them are. We try to release new ones on the regular. And I have 300 draft handouts sitting over here waiting for approval. We got to pick out 5 or 6 new ones. So your wish is about to happen. And I'm excited, right? So, you should be seeing those pretty soon. I'd suggest probably a week or 2, but they've got new stats, new information. And look, that's a leadership thing about the handouts. Maybe that's a conversation we'll have in leadership training. Because folks, if you're relying on handouts to do your outreach, you're not doing it right. It's the way it is. But anyway, you'll know soon as those get approved, they will be made available. They'll be made available in downloadable form to local leadership, and the printed varieties will be available on the TNM store. So there we go. Okay, let's get over here. All right. Oh, before I take this one, a reminder. We're at the midway point, so it's time for me to do the thing again. If you have a question, you still have time to get it in. You can drop it in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, drop it in the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, drop it in the comments on this video. And if you're watching on X, you can be sure to drop it in the chat on that video as well. Additionally, you can drop it to that address that's coming up here shortly. Anyway, down at the bottom, coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Go ahead and get your questions in, and I will try to get them answered within the time frame allotted. Right, I'm here for it looks like another 25 minutes, but I have a tendency to go over time. I can pull a few minutes here or there. All right, let's get to Nathan's question. Nathan asks, he says, with the Department of Education being taken apart and education coming back to the states, do you think Texas will focus more on Texas history versus American history? Okay, so let me just kind of break down that question. So the DOE is being dismantled, right? To a certain extent. People are like, Trump is eliminating the Department of Education. No, he's not. He's taking pieces of it and either not funding them or shifting the responsibilities over to another department. All of this under the guise or I guess the intention of giving the states more control over education. Now, what the shape of that is going to look like is really the question, right? What is, first and foremost, what's going to happen is it's going to expose the role of the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, to a lot more people. There are going to be a lot more people that become cognizant of what it actually is the Department of Education does. So that's really good. That's a really good thing because, one of the things that the Department of Education has been, although they claim that this is not the case, they have been the essentially the thought police, right? And how they do it is they dangle strings, and they say, if you want this money, you've got to attach your education system to this string, or you don't get the money. So they take our money and then effectively use it to extort us to do the things that they want us to do. Now, Texas has control over curriculum, all those things. We have a state board of education. We have the Texas Education Agency, which there's a massive need for the Texas Education Agency to take a hike. There are some things about it that just, that would be an entire podcast episode. We may need to get somebody on the Texas News podcast, an interview about that, just to really talk about it. But the point here is, so education coming back to the states. Well, it's been in the states, but it's been, yet again, like every other issue, clouded by this 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is our relationship with the federal government. No one, so many things happen in the legislature and in policy making and in education and transportation and everything else that are just simply policies to get us in compliance with the federal government so they will give us some of our money back. So take them out of the equation, we may see some significant improvement. But look, if you want to address the education and curriculum issues here in Texas, you need to go talk to your representative on the State Board of Education, right? That's who's making the ultimate decisions about curriculum here in Texas. And we know this because the TNM has been in some massive humdinger fights with some of these social engineers that want to poison the mind of children. I mean, you guys, you're going to have to go look it up on the TNM News site. But the most recent one was we had a massive fight with the State Board of, not the entire State Board of Education, but they had essentially a curriculum subcommittee that submitted a report that was making a recommendation to the curriculum standards on the State Board of Education that would remove all references to the Alamo defenders as heroes, because they said that was a value-based judgment and it had no place. And it's like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that you're now going to remove the idea, our belief that the Alamo defenders were heroes. Well, guess what? They were heroes. And so what if it is a value-based judgment? It is in alignment with Texas values. And so anyone who would try to strip that status from them in teaching young minds tells you that they don't want future generations to think of the Alamo defenders as heroes. And it's just that same crap that we had with the reimagining of the Alamo. I mean, it's just an extension. But, the difference was at reimagining the Alamo, we're talking about a place where visitors go. The fight that we had in relation to the SBOE was all about engineering future generations of Texans to hate their history. Okay. So we have some fights. So if you're concerned about that, but, do you think Texas will focus more on Texas history versus American history? Look, it already floors people that come to Texas from outside of Texas that we have a very specific Texas history class. I mean, every public school student has to take Texas history. I've always advocated for taking for more. I mean, I would be fine if students had to take it at every level, not necessarily every grade level, but at every level. But the cool part about that is that most attempts to water down that curriculum have been successfully defeated. Okay. But look, as an organization, because political, cultural, and economic independence, on the cultural side of it, we're going to always advocate for more Texas history education, whether it's in public school, private school, homeschool, to the general public, people, universities, people that don't go to school. I think we would be much better as a nation if every one of us knew more about our Texas history. I believe that's the case. It's been something that I would have liked to have seen in the TNM for years, for us to have a specific national leadership team level director focused on Texas culture. Literally, a director of cultural engagement or whatever. I mean, I think I would have loved to. I would love to see that. I don't know. Maybe that's something you guys think. Maybe you guys think that that's something we need to do more of. Drop comments. Would love to hear your feedback on it. If you think that's a priority for us, but I will always stand by the fact, based off the research, that the cultural aspect of this, which is included in education, is just as important as the political and the economic aspects of independence. Those are the three pillars of independence. You want to secure your independence long term, it's political, it's cultural, it's economic, and you should treat those three equally. And if you treat those three equally, then what you get is a perpetual independence. But at any time you begin to let either of those erode, because Breitbart said it, politics is downstream from culture. You ignore the cultural aspect of it, you eventually lose the political aspect of it. The economic, if you lose your economic independence, what does that do? Well, that becomes that erodes your hedge against cultural influence, and eventually, if you begin to lose your economic independence, that money becomes, or that loss of economic independence becomes, a tool that can be used to erode your political independence. And by the time it's all over with, the whole thing collapses. So you have to treat them all three equally, not once you gain independence, but to even get to the point of getting your independence, you've got to really stick the landing on all three of them, and you have to give equal emphasis to them all. So anyway, Nathan, I went on a tangent. Hopefully you got your answer. Hopefully you were able to pick through all of that stuff that I just said. But we'll see what happens, right? All right, let's get down to it. All right. All right, here's one from Joe. Joe asks, what are your thoughts on a Texas republic that has declared itself a neutral country with a very limited defense force, aiming to prevent our national budget from being squandered on a military-industrial complex that seeks to drag our new republic into foreign conflicts? That's a great question, Joe. You want to know my thoughts specifically. My thoughts specifically are actually informed by the thoughts of the founders of the first Texas Republic. They were not military adventurers, right? I mean, I think they subscribe to the good old TJ theory, which is peace and commerce with all, and no entangling foreign alliances, right? I think that's where they sat, and that's kind of where I think. I mean, I will tell you that having a very limited defense force to me means you got enough muscle to defend your homeland from full-scale invasion, right? And from external threats. That's what the role of a Texas Defense Force or a Texas military, that's the way that I see it. So much of the military budget is swollen up, not by homeland protection, but by force projection, right? It's about projecting force out to the world. And, there is a certain amount of force projection. You want to dissuade people from doing dirty things to you before they do it. You want their war planners, when they're war gaming out a scenario, to just look at it and go, there's no way we could ever do this. That being said, the idea of force projection on the part of the United States military has grown for a long time into military adventurism, right? We think, or the United States military, or the United States, I'm taking the military separate from this, but the United States foreign policy has been one of military adventurism, of imposing the will of the federal government on places that are not part of the United States. And so, as such, it has become necessary in their minds to put bases in 100 countries, to have U.S. military personnel everywhere, but kind of where they're needed. And I think that was one of the chief criticisms about the border, the border issue, which is, you've got U.S. military troops protecting people in other countries, but we can't repel an invasion on our southern border. Right? Suddenly that's a bridge too far. When it seemed like Joe Biden was hell bent on getting the United States into the war between Ukraine and Russia and saying they would put troops on the border between, it's like, so you're saying you'll defend that border, but not ours, right? And I think that's where a lot of us got this feeling. I don't know that there is a tremendous taste for military adventurism right now. I just don't. I think people are sick of perpetual war. I would hope that I'm right, and I would hope that on the other side of Texas becoming a fully self-governing and independent nation, that Texans would not suddenly have an appetite for military adventurism. And if we structure our military in such a way that it is primarily focused on the security of Texas, then it makes military adventurism very difficult. So anyway. Hey, thank you for that question, Joe. I really do appreciate it. Don't get to talk about that very often. Okay, let's see what we got here. Man, there's a lot going on here. Okay, who signed this? Christine. Okay. Is there anywhere we can see which counties/towns had or have the highest leaning towards supporting TEXIT? Not that I'm aware of, right? I don't think, like, most of the polling that has been done, third-party polling, has been done. They do it statewide, and they don't weight it, so they don't get into getting enough of a sample size in particular cities to make sure they do that. However, what we do internally, and of course we don't have this available. There's no way to do it. Maybe it would make a really interesting infographic. Making a note of it. What we do maintain internally is, to track, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of inside baseball. So how we track metrics toward our goal is we maintain updated numbers of registered voters from the Secretary of State's office, which are broken out county by county. Okay. From that, what we do is we have a raw number of supporters. Okay. So people who declared or registered support with us, either by registering their support on our website, registering with a volunteer, becoming a member, making a contribution, or becoming a volunteer, right? Those are all direct ways that you become a registered supporter, because they all ask for the same information, the same declarations, et cetera, okay? So those are the mechanisms. So what we do is we maintain that number county by county, and then what we do with that number is we draw it down to a percentage of what we refer to as non-suspense voters, aka registered voters that are not on the Secretary of State's suspense list. And the suspense list, before anyone asks, is the list that is maintained that essentially says we can't verify that this person actually lives in the county anymore, so they are suspended. And I believe that there is a verification process for that can get them removed off the suspense list. Okay. So what we do is we maintain those ratios. So how many non-suspense voters do we have in a county versus how many supporters we have, that we've actually got to register. Now, the difference here is that is a more stringent criteria than what most polling does. So when the pollsters come out, they're not asking for a declaration. Are you willing to commit to the TNM and political, cultural, and economic? They're not. Our criteria is far more narrow than what you would get even on a referendum vote, right? So that being said, there are some ways that we could use polling data to extrapolate, and we've done that sort of data work before, where we were able to go in and essentially take some third-party polling that was done statewide, broken down by party affiliation, and then extrapolate that out to how many people voted in a previous primary. All of that is a bunch of inside baseball to say, there is no map or counties or towns or whatever else, but I think we could probably work something out. That would be an extrapolation. So, there would be a lot of caveats with it, but I think that would be interesting. I mean, I get to see heat maps, right, to see where concentrations of supporters are, and that's kind of what I look at. But I think it would be interesting to see those percentages as heat maps, and then extrapolate that based off of, like an average of the last 3 third-party surveys, just to see what it looks like. So yeah, I put that on the list. I think that'd be cool. So we'll get that done. Okay. Still feels like I served this country for 8 years in vain. Yeah. Thank you for leading the charge. Thank you for your question, Christine. I really do appreciate it. Wow, man, those credentials. I really hope you don't have to type out your email footer every time you send an email. That's impressive as all get out. Okay, let's go here and check this bad boy. Oh, we got one in here. All right. Yeah, citizenship question. Okay, Hess Defense asks, in the future republic, what are the qualifications for persons from other states to apply for citizenship? And what are the voting qualifications? For instance, intelligence and vested interest. There are often times when I think many of us have come across some people that have said they voted, and we looked at it and said, man, they should at least give them the test that they give the toddlers, right? That's got the little box and it's got the shapes, and make them put the blocks in the right shapes to be able to access the ballot. I think that we have all had that feeling once in a while. But anyway, let me get directly to your question. So what you're asking about is a policy question that comes ultimately after the TEXIT vote, right? So when we work toward becoming a self-governing independent nation, that milestone that exists is the referendum, and then things get super real after that, and we have to accelerate. We have to create a lot of those policies that, again, move us toward independence, making us more functionally and structurally like a self-governing independent nation, which are all things that we can do here, right? We can do those now in the run-up to the referendum. But what you're asking for is something that really is one of those things that can only be affected, or generally affected, at the point that the voters of Texas have said we're done, which is creating this individual citizenship and immigration policy about who can be a citizen, who can't, who can come here, who can't. Those are all things that get to be done by every single sovereign, independent, self-governing nation. I mean, that's just what they are. If you ever want absolute control over your border and immigration policy, the only way you do that is by becoming a self-governing independent nation. That is not something you can do this side of independence, right? So that being said, what would you like for those things to be? Because ultimately, we will be able to set those policies. We're going to be able to set what we want our citizenship to look like. Who gets to be one, who doesn't get to be one. What does it take for someone to immigrate here and become a citizen? We get to do that. That's the thing that is so wonderful about becoming a self-governing independent nation is now we have the opportunity to do these things that we've never been able to do before. We've never had a say in citizenship or immigration or what those qualifications are. All that crap gets done by the federal government, and very poorly. I think we would all agree. And so independence for us means the opportunity to create a system that reflects who we are as a people and reflects what our values are. And there will be knockdown, drag out debates as to what that policy should look like. And I believe that there will probably, that discussion will also be affected by our separation negotiations with the United States federal government. They're going to want, as we saw during Brexit, they're going to want guarantees for U.S. citizens that live here, and we're going to want guarantees for Texans that are born here that are working abroad. There will be effectively a class of citizenship that will have to be set during the negotiation phase, because we're going to have to argue for the rights of those Texans. We don't want them being treated like second class visitors. I mean, God knows they roll out the red carpet for everybody from every country around the world, but something just tells me if we don't get codified protections for Texans that are living and working in the other states of the United States right now, then they would probably abuse them, and we don't want that. So ultimately, the answer is what do you want it to be? Because we're all going to be able to get in there in the scrum and advocate for the best policy that is the most reflective of what Texans want for their brand spanking new self-governing independent nation. All right. So thank you for that. Oh, hey, look at that. Coming in here at the tail end. Look, big thanks to Sean. Sean, thank you so much for your super chat. You're right. TEXIT needs to happen yesterday. Here's the thing, though. TEXIT is happening, right? It's already, TEXIT is the process. And so it's happening. Texas is already moving toward independence. We're already becoming more operationally and functionally and structurally like a self-governing independent nation. We're moving that direction. But I agree with you. I want to see that process accelerate. I mean, this is one of the reasons that the monthly training, the monthly webinar that our organizational development guys do with county leadership applicants is called the TEXIT Accelerator. Look, we want to put our foot on the gas. We want to put that gas pedal all the way to the floor, because we want to get this done Ricky tick. And it's why I think probably our guys are a little more frustrated by the recalcitrance of the Texas legislature than most people. I think that's why Texas nationalists are pretty impatient with their friends and neighbors and coworkers and whoever else that profess their support for Texas independence, but don't do anything to help out. I mean, it's the equivalent of you out there, moving stuff around in your yard, pulling stuff out of the house, moving in the house, and the neighbor sitting there on the apron of his driveway, on the tailgate of his truck, drinking a beer and going, man, that looks really heavy. Man, I think you're going to really enjoy that house. And man, and just sitting there and just watching you sweat like a pig, and hump all your stuff into the house. I mean, it's why we get probably a little more frustrated than other people when we see that the legislature and even our neighbors that don't feel the sense of urgency that we do. So, Sean, I'm with you, buddy. Thank you so much for your super chat, man. That is very gracious, and I mean, it's going to be used to do what we're doing, which is to continue to build the organization and the movement and to make Texas independence a reality. Every single action we take is in service of our mission. And so, Sean, thank you for that. And look, here's another one, Eric. Thank you, Eric. Eric Riddle, $40 super chat. Thank you for that so much. And guys, let me tell you, Eric was part of the volunteer legislative team. You guys may have seen the article about it on the TNM News site. As part of the legislative volunteer team that was at the Capitol like a week ago tomorrow, right? I think last Thursday. where they went. They talked to legislators working to advance our legislative priorities, to go in there and advocate for legislation that sets us up, moves us closer toward Texas independence. And, while we strategically had to make this decision to not do the referendum bill, that doesn't mean that we're still not advancing Texas independence. We're moving toward that goal. And Eric was part of the team that took his time, took time out of his day. Hang on. We've had more talk than coffee. It's obvious. Took time out of his day, drove to Austin, got with the rest of the team, and knocked doors, met legislators, and represented every one of you, right? Every one of you were represented by Eric and the rest of those volunteers. And my understanding is that you guys were well received. And so, Eric, thank you so much for the super chat. It is much appreciated. Okay, friends, that I do believe is going to be a wrap for this week. It kind of went by fast, didn't it? Like really fast. But I'm always here with you guys, right? We're going to get next podcast episode cut this week. Hope you guys are enjoying these interviews we're doing on Texas News. Would love to hear your feedback on it. If you're not watching them, you need to go do that. And remember, every Wednesday night, boom, right here, Late Night Coffee Talk. So be sure you set your watch for that. A reminder, if you are not already a registered supporter, as we talked about earlier, be sure to head over to tnm.me/vote and register your support today. We need everyone to stand up and be counted so that we can make Texas independence happen. Texas independence got to be a reality. Additionally, if you're already a registered supporter and you have not downloaded the mobile app, please do so. Head over to tnm.me/app and download the mobile app today. Available for both Apple and for Android. And that thing is important. It's what helps us bypass this big tech censorship. Many of you are probably on here today on the Late Night Coffee Talk because you got the notification from the TNM mobile app. Because I'm going to tell you, I hear often people not getting our emails, and the email went out today, and it's on the calendar, and the notifications go, and you don't get them. This is why the app exists, so we can make sure to let people know critical information, things that need to be done. So be sure to download the app. And additionally, right now, head over to donate.tnm.me if you want to join. You want to join Sean and Eric and help support the mission of the TNM and help us continue to produce more and more content and reach more and more Texans. Expand our strength and influence so that we can make TEXIT happen faster. Then head over to donate.tnm.me. Would absolutely appreciate it. $5, $10, whatever you can give is greatly appreciated. Okay, folks. I'm not even going to try to do the Porky Pig thing, right? That's all, folks. But look, that is all, folks. That's it. It's happening, right? It's over. So I'm going to leave you with the words that I leave you with every single time we're together. They're not my words. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.
Texas, all hail the mighty state. Texas, our Texas, so wonderful, so great. Boldest and grandest, standing every test. Oh, empire wide and glorious, you stand supremely blessed. God bless.